Bueno, hola Hugo, buenos días. Estamos aquí con el
Hello,
director
good morning. We're here with
Endocentric
Endocentric Psychology
Psychology
Director,
Director,
Hugo
Hugo Villarreal.
Villarreal.
Vamos a
This
expandir
is the
por
first
esta
interview
primera
that we're going to do in
Ok,
English
lo
to
que sea que hemos
expand
estado
this
haciendo
towards
en
all of
base a
the
pues, todo
English-speaking
el mundo de habla
community.
anglosajona. Ok, pues va a ser una entrevista
Okay, so this is going to be
basada
an interview in which we're
poquito
going to
en
be
los
based
principios de lo que viene
on
siendo
the
la psicología
beginnings
endocéntrica, a ver cómo
of
se creó,
endocentric
de dónde viene,
psychology,
dónde nació.
how it was created, when it
Entonces,
was
Hugo, si
born,
nos puedes decir
how
cómo
you
empezó
came
la
about it.
psicología
So, Hugo,
endocéntrica, dónde salió
how
todo
did it
esto.
start? Where did all of this come about? Well, there's two parts in this history. The first one is the fact that I was going to psychology since I was really young. At around 6 years old, I started with psychoanalysis. I remember that I went to the therapy, and the therapist, he was an orthodoxist. And for a 6-year-old, it was just stay there, sit down, how are you? What are you going to play with? Draw something. And I felt like this is not going to help me. It was because of issues in my school, because of my dad and mom. I was there until 12 or 15 years old, and the only thing that changed is the fact that I changed from a lollipop to a cigarette, and there's not much that we talked about. And I went through a lot of psychologists. One of them, some of them because they took me to, and others because I really liked them. I was in Gestalt, transactional analysis, all the humanistic psychologies, the trichotonomic theory of being, and to transpersonal psychology. I was in Gestalt trainments and I went through NLP. And all of those things, yes, they gave me a lot of stuff, but they didn't leave a lot. They left a lot to the therapist. Afterwards, after all of this, I was studying engineering, and I really like psychology, and I really love physics. So I integrated both parts in the work so that people could have control when they go into therapy. That was the central point because the knowledge was deposited in the therapist. So you could tell the therapist what you had, and the therapist tell you if you are right or wrong. But a lot of those therapies don't tell you what to do. One of the central ideas in endocentric psychology is that you have to end with that part. The part that you go into therapy trying to resolve something, and the therapist sees you through the diagnostic of whichever theory he's working with. And in the end, somebody goes to the therapy because he has something wrong. He feels like a victim, he's treated like a victim, and he's not going to be okay until when he feels okay and when the therapist thinks he's okay. But endocentric psychology treats with a didactic and educational process in which you are taught how things work. Afterwards, people, with the knowledge in their own hands, after they have their own knowledge of how they work, we start working on how their behaviors, emotions, and what he experiences, what he perceives, and what he lives in a day to day life. The word endocentric means endo, inside, and movement towards the center. Whatever is outside, you create it, and you experience it because you put it there. That's why people don't come here and work with something that was done to them. As people, we put ourselves in certain situations and we organize the elements that are around ourselves. The interaction between people that are around us is regulated by the experiences that have been impressed on my nervous system. The important factors in this interaction are the experiences that I've been living that have been modifying me, and the genetic factors, the polygyny, the genetic inheritance from the perception, from everything that is impressed on our nervous system. All of this has several elements. Any experience is impressed or printed through what we experience, what we perceive, and what we become aware of. This we call the impression tunnel. This impression of experience is being recorded in the nervous system, and it's building the neuropolitics. The other part is the inheritance. It has certain parts that are transmitted, and the perception that we have has certain weight from our parents, from our family, how they are, how they perceive the world, how we experience it, and what we become aware of. There's another factor, which are the neuroumbilical impressions. Those impressions also modify all the responses that are within our mom, that become within our mother, when we are within our mother. At the moment that we are born, the intrauterine ego that the baby is experiencing dies. And at the moment that we are born, new experiences are being printed or impressed that will define our neuropolicy or neuropolitics. The fundamental factors of endocentric psychology's work are the impressions of experience, intrauterine impressions, and the genetic impressions. This is how endocentric psychology was developed. And it was clothed by three significant theories. The first one is a theory by Timothy Leary, and the structure that he left, just the structure of the neuroevolutive process. The other part is Jacobo Greenberg's work, a Mexican scientist, about how an experience is created. He developed a synergic theory, and the last part has to do with biological processes. It's worked through Rupert Sheldrake's work, the morphic resonance theory, nature's habits, the habits that we have at a biological level. Timothy Leary has been criticized because he was a father of psychedelia. He was taken aside, excluded. He was an irreverent person on conductual or conductive behavioral psychology. This structure cannot be set aside by science. And we can see that in the time this structure was developed, we didn't have all the advances in science that we have today. We have to take into consideration how since 1936 there was a union between physics and behavior, the connection that it had. It really caught my attention how people were talking about quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and several people like Deepak Chopra started talking about it. He gave a lot of diffusion to these ideas. And I came across certain books of Jacobo Greenberg. He had a book that had to do with the unified field in relationship with the nervous system or the brain, but since a physiological level, not from a Hindu philosophy. There was a connection between the quantum field and the neural field that Jacobo Greenberg worked since 1973, 1974. And Deepak Chopra used to work this as a Hindu philosophy, not as a physiological fact. That was one of the parts. The other part is the fact that we didn't have all the advances that we have today in science, all the neurological studies, all the resonances that we can now check, all the dynamics that happen in the brain. That we have today and helps a lot to the neurosciences. That's in regards to the psychology, physics, and physiology. But there were also theories about what happens with the mind, matter, and how the mind modifies matter and matter modifies mind. Today we have several equipments or tools that we use as prehistoric artifacts, just hitting one thing to another. In prehistory, we hit something. Today we hit accelerated particles. It's the same primitive history. It's as if you have a rattle toy and you hit your head with the rattle toy and you look towards somewhere else and then you look back to what you're doing. Today, with these experiments, they can determine how all the circumstances at energies or a subtle energy level, everything in our environment is modified and how they modify our brains. That can be determined nowadays. And this gives it a lot of solidity to the new theories. In matters of how experience is created, there's a field out there in a neural field that get together and experiences arises. That's Jacobo Greenberg's theory. The other point, Rupert Sheldrake's, in his morphogenetic field theory, he speaks about how nature has habits and we are inside of those habits. He establishes how the gene modifies the organism and how the environment and the genes and our physiology is constantly being modified. I want to clarify a point that I have never made before, that those three characters have a halo of doubt towards science. The three of them have an element that science is missing. There can be logic in science, and there is. Creativity is almost outside, and intuition is way out there, not taken into account. All these three parts are part of a person. When we are out there in science, research is being narrowed towards what the person has inside of his head. Timothy Leary, with all the LSD and the drug culture that he came about, psilocybin, made it lose a lot of credibility in the world of science. Jacobo Greenberg used to study the effects of Mexican shamans. He had a wide range of research in that aspect, but science looked at him as a shaman and shamans looked at him as a scientist. And that left him inside of that doubt halo within all of his work. And I'm speaking about research. The fact that some of us do have those patterns of creativity and intuition, those are really important patterns. But all the academic orthodoxy is usually closed towards those types of ideas. On the other hand, we also have Rupert Sheldrake, which established that all of these patterns and nature's habits have to do or are related with telepathy. And all of these left him, after all the work that he done or that he did with morphic resonance, he just came up with that word, and everybody at Cambridge and in molecular biology were talking bad things about him. Those three characters I didn't choose, those are the ones that I needed to make up this theory, my theory. I don't compare myself with them in any level, in any ways. And in the end, everybody's going to say that he took the three rejected people and everything is going to be taken towards the side, excluded. But in the end, it's about giving people the tools so that they have their personal knowledge in their hands. The first thing that we have to look at is that mostly all of psychology has to do with the fact that you sit down and you have a problem that you didn't know you had. How is it possible that the cabron that is in front of me knows more of the process that I have inside of me? So he tells you that you have something way deeper, and you can look inside deep in yourself, and then we can find out what's going on with you. So I didn't sit down and say that I wanted to create something that didn't have this. What I started to create were tools so that people could be in touch with their own function of their own nervous system. We started studying the brain. We had equipment and tools so that we could study the brain. I first studied engineering and then I studied psychology. Through all of this, I started this model of research that had both parts, the social part and the exact part, the math. Later, we integrated the medical part to integrate how the body works. These three parts didn't have to do anything towards looking for something. They just brought elements to help people. It wasn't research to get towards somewhere. It was just elements that we needed to work with people that, for example, have migraines. How does it work in your brain? How does it affect your physiologically? And we didn't center ourselves in any type of theory. That's why we didn't end up working as every other psychologist or doctor. We didn't end up in the same process. We center ourselves in what the patient finds out. It's to really listen to what the patient has, to build a mathematical model, a feedback model, to check what we need to fix. There's no interpretations. There's a phenomenological interpretation about the conducts, the behaviors of the nervous system, of the body, and from there, we can go into the empirical field, do some research, see what has been done in the past, and go deeper in that way. So we started to do our own research, and in those processes, or in those research processes with those tools, we came across several important researchers, universities, psychologists, neurologists, physiologists, and there we came across like Jacobo Greenberg, that I actually knew before I started this. He was one of the inspirations. Also Timothy Leary, John Lilly, Charles Start, and you start seeing at a field in psychology that is not the one that you're taught in school. Finally, since I started studying psychology, I was really embedded in this, but my interest was to discover, as I did in my thesis, mental health. Nobody can determine. It's like saying, okay, whoever hasn't done a stupidity or is not crazy, throw the first rock. So people are more concerned in resolving how they feel, instead of understanding why they put themselves in those situations to feel like that. When people center themselves in trying to resolve their problems with their relationships with mom, with dad, with labor situations or economic situations, they want to resolve that, but just because they want to feel as they were feeling in the past before they knew the problem that they had. Those problems would be better resolved if we understood why I put myself in that specific spot. Why did I organize everything around me in that way? That's what psychology or endocentric psychology is about. There's a lot of theories that tells them that, yes, you are the creator, you have all possibilities, you are God, and you can do whatever you want. But first, we need to understand, why did I organize everything out there to be like this? It's like skipping the step of understanding, why did I organize everything to be like this? And I want to change something outside without understanding the process. It's as if I had the notes or all of the musical notes and saying, okay, I want to create Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And no, it doesn't work like that. The first part is to understand my internal process, the internal processes, the impressions that I have in my experience, the neuroumbilical impressions and the genetic impressions. The impressions that we have when we're born, the emotional
of
impressions,
any kind.
how I see myself, what people are expecting from me, how do people look at me in society, how I look at myself in an intimate relation, all the policies that are around my family, how does my organism respond, every sickness that I have, every lowerage of physical energy that I have is impressed in the nervous system. All the emotions that are sustained, they generate certain feelings or emotions. And those emotions change the way that you are, your personality, your mood, your character. They change your intuitive abilities. They can get lowered if you are with negative emotions that disconnect you from what's happening out there. It generates psychic symptoms. Then we have the other experience impressions, which are a more complex structure to change, which are the genetic experiences. Then we have the other interactions or experiences that have to do with energetic level, but the subtle energies that have to do with protons, electrons, quarks, neutrons, gravitons, and all the covalent interactions that we have at a physics level. This is part of spirituality, as endocentric psychology sees it, connected to all, with all. In general terms, this is a process in endocentric psychology. This is a comprehension of our evolutive process. Every single person has something to bring forth, to give back, and someone that is disconnected cannot contribute anything to our world. In the last 200 years, there's around 200 people that have contributed something significant to the world. This, for endocentric psychology, and in a personal level, means that people don't pay attention to their own selves. And if they do express that, then the rejection of people comes about, which is one of the saddest things that humanity has. Not listening to the other, not being open because they think differently. If he doesn't think like me, we have to finish with him. So we all are here to contribute something in this evolutive process that has been there since the beginning of humankind. We all have a connection in a biological level, at a genetic level, at any level, on everything that surrounds us. We are all connected. All of this is contained in a space. And this is intelligence. I am an expression of this intelligence that has this intrauterine impression, the genetic from my mom and dad, and this gives me a potential to connect what I have in my head, in my genetic, in my body, in order to contribute something. So I invite people not to be afraid, to express, to construct, to build things. There's a lot of examples. We have, for example, the Tesla guy, who hires people without any academic knowledge because they have important ideas that are not stale or stuck in the same process. We can contribute something different with the creativity, intuition, and obviously with the logic and the processes that we measure within the neuroefficiency. In endocentric psychology, where is it heading to? It's heading to a research where people have some knowledge of their own things in their correspondent times. Because there's people that are based in shamanism to create something. They're based in ancestral ideas to bring them forward with new technologies and bring something forward. It's not about rejecting the past. It's about seeing it just as part of history that has brought it to where we are right now. We don't have to look back to resolve something because what we have right now is what we are experiencing right now, and this is where the true knowledge comes from. Another part is generating culture, all the scientific diffusion about health, about psychology, about the human being. People are the ones that have to walk their own paths. They have to take themselves where they need to get to, but from within an internal perspective. Let me put an example. People are looking for things out there to feel something. For example, freedom. If I do this, if I do that, if I have this, if I have that, if my mom and dad tell me something and I go against that, then I feel free. And that only brings a false sense of pride, separation from my family, and if I'm wrong, I go back to my family and it's really shameful. This is not freedom. Freedom is not something that you're going to reach outside. Freedom is a state that you have to build within yourself that gives you the possibilities to decide without any factors from out there. In the end, your decision is not put on all the variables of what people are telling you. You're not going to be going against things. Even when you want to do something, if people tell you, go ahead and do it, you stop doing it because they're telling you to do it. For example, play a game. For example, Alex, do a badass interview right now. And the normal thing would be that Alex would throw everything away and he'd just leave. Or to your wife whenever she's washing dishes. Wash the dishes. It's an order right now. She's going to get mad. If your son is studying and you tell him, study, this is an order, he's going to close the book and he's going to end it. If he's kind of healthy mentally, he's going to laugh. So none of the states that people want to build have to do with the past. The experiences from the past are distorted with time, and we just have the present, the now. But logically, the present for the brain starts or lasts 50 milliseconds. If you split a second in 1,000, you just take 50 of those. The therapies of the now, they don't work either. In endocentric psychology, we have a process so that we can tell ourselves how we want to experience ourselves within the day. So those things happen to us. Our brain is going to start bringing all the data from outside so that our neurophysiology starts doing what we need to do. It's like going beyond or behind the production camera so that we decide what's going to happen. Whatever's happening in front of our eyes, we cannot modify that. It already happened. I cannot modify it. It's usually take me to the same ends, with the same types of relationships, with the same types of problems, with everything. So I need to go back into production to change something. The next thing that we can talk about are going to be all the policies or the politics of our nervous system. So go ahead and go into our webpage, endocentric.org. So thanks a lot to everybody.
It's the first time, es la primera vez. Esperemos que se ponga un poquito mejor las próximas
Hopefully next time the translation gets better.
With this talks and translations, we get better as we walk.
Okay. Gracias, Alex.
Gracias a ti, Hugo. Thank you.